Good morning, philosophers. Let's get right into it. Your thoughts and your feelings. This is a very popular theory, but it's a false theory. Events do not directly affect our psyches the way a needle in the arm causes pain. Even then, the pain has to go through our brain before we can feel it. To get a glimpse of the correct theory, imagine that you are about to enter a room where someone awaits you. Your emotions will be related to your preconceptions, your thoughts or beliefs, which we'll refer to as B. If you expect a violent criminal, you may very well feel afraid. If instead you anticipate that it's your young child who has been missing for days, you're likely to feel greatly relieved and overjoyed. However, your beliefs, expectations, and anticipations, your Bs, are things that you generate and control. And it's B that creates C. Beliefs create emotions. A, or the activating event alone, does not create emotions. Suppose 100 airplane passengers are unexpectedly given parachutes and instructed to jump from the plane. A. If a physical situation alone could cause emotions, if A could directly cause C, then all the 100 people would feel the same way. But obviously those who regard skydiving positively, B, are going to have a C very different from the others. The fact that feelings come from thinking was known to the ancient Greek Stoics and to many Buddhist teachers. It has more recently been rediscovered by Albert Ellis and other psychologists, and has been tested in practice by thousands of therapists. Unfortunately, there are still many therapists and counselors who are either unaware of this fact or who continually deny it. It's not surprising that most ordinary people also deny it. Your childhood is irrelevant to your present problems. Everyone knows that individuals respond very differently to similar events. Jane dreads her upcoming examination so intensely that she can't sleep the night before, and walks into the examination hall shaking with terror. Her friend Barbara, who is taking the same test, remains quite unruffled. Clearly, a person's response to events is not entirely explained by the events themselves, but owes something to the person. However, instead of looking at that person's conscious beliefs, for example, Jane's beliefs about the test, therapists often try to explain the person's feelings and actions through their, quote, unconscious minds. Sigmund Freud developed this way of explaining human behavior early in the 20th century, a method popularized by many Hollywood movies from the 1930s on. Freud believed that our feelings and actions are caused by unconscious impulses, things that are in our minds but that we don't know about. Our minds are filled with dark, disguised forces of which we're normally quite unaware. How did these mysterious forces get there? They allegedly originated in our childhood experiences. Jane's fear of the test might be explained by incidents in her early childhood. Freud believed that the way to cure Jane is to uncover the buried memories of those incidents, have Jane relive those incidents, and show how they caused Jane's present anxiety about tests. This excavation of Jane's unconscious mind can be a long and expensive process. The therapist encourages the patient to reconstruct some childhood incident, and to accept the therapist's theory about how this is related to the patient's current problems. This approach to solving people's problems has become very well known, and many people expect therapists to be interested in the details of their childhood. But there's actually not a scrap of solid evidence that memories of childhood agonies have much to do with a person's continuing emotional difficulties, nor that uncovering those agonies will do anything to help the person now. Even where a person's current problems really are related to a past unpleasant experience, it's the person's present thinking about that experience that does the damage, not the experience itself. The theory that our feelings and behaviors are governed by unconscious forces is not only unsubstantiated, it could be harmful. If people with problems believe this theory, they could become demoralized. The theory suggests to people with emotional problems that they are the puppets of dark forces they cannot control or even recognize. Instead of encouraging clients to feel that they are responsible for their problems and that they can do something about them right away, the theory suggests that the individual is helpless, even possessed. The individual is, in effect, encouraged to give up the struggle to be rational and effective. Shoulds and musts. Your feelings come from your thinking. This doesn't mean that if you tell yourself everything is fine and you have no problems, then you will feel fine and your problems will disappear. The 3-minute therapy method does not recommend, quote, thinking positively, telling yourself to cheer up, or fondly dwelling on comfortable images that everything is wonderful. The advice glibly offered to emotional sufferers, quote, worrying doesn't do any good, so why worry, end quote, is usually of little help because the anxious person doesn't know how to stop worrying. Such a person has a definite system of beliefs which has become a fixed dogma and which automatically generates distress. Without attacking and changing that system of beliefs, there will probably be little progress in reducing anxiety. But the sufferer doesn't think much about the system of beliefs, doesn't consider that the beliefs might be questionable, and doesn't notice how the beliefs lead to counterproductive and self-destructive behavior. I'm trying to relate this to my to internal family systems therapy, in which I'm not an expert on it. So don't consider me an authority on internal family systems therapy, but oftentimes the idea is to start examining your negative behaviors, which I guess he would call C's. Find out what emotional thing is triggering them. Go back and examine that situation. Might be in childhood, might be yesterday, might be the week before, and then sort of relive or rework through that situation. Like, if you had it to do over, what should have happened? Like, if it was last week, you could think about like what you could have done differently, how you could have handled it better, who was right and who was wrong in the situation. Or if it was something that happened to you as a child, like you were a young child, somebody was abusing you, let's say. Well, you could go back and sort of reparent yourself and imagine that you as an adult were also there in that situation and what you would have done as an adult to protect yourself, what your parents should have done in that situation to protect you, for example. All in an effect to better incorporate the various parts of yourself that generate the harmful, I guess this guy would say, disturbing emotional reactions, which is kind of the same thing that this guy's talking about. Like, I think they're alluding to changing the B, what you think about A, your expectations, the shoulds and musts, probably. All right, let me continue. To start on the path to healthy thought patterns, it's first necessary to identify the sufferer's system of beliefs. This isn't a lengthy process of excavating unconscious memories. Usually a few minutes of asking simple questions will elicit a person's faulty thinking. If someone asks you whether you have a belief about the persistence of physical objects, you will probably be puzzled and hesitate to give a definite reply, or you may even reply in the negative. However, you don't pay much attention to the possibility that the chair you're sitting on will suddenly vanish, causing you to painfully bruise your buttocks on the floor. In this sense, you do indeed subscribe to a belief in the persistence of physical objects, and this belief determines your behavior. In this case, of course, the belief is broadly true. In the same way, the beliefs responsible for emotional problems are deeply rooted. Unconsidered assumptions. Yes, that's what it is. Unconsidered assumptions. So like, if something happened to you as a child, let's say, or last week, the time doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Freudian childhood problems. But the childhood thing's the best example, I think, for what I'm trying to say. If something happened to you, if trauma happened to you as a child, we don't have the mental faculties or tools to examine the assumptions in the moment of that time. We're young, we're a kid, or whatever. Or maybe if we're an adult, then the version of that would be we don't have the wherewithal in the moment to examine it in real time. That happens often, especially in stressful situations, right? And so going back and working through past events allows us to consider what we were thinking about at the time, which parts of what we were thinking about were incorrect or just the unconsidered assumptions of the situation, reprocessing the situation from a more rational position. I like that. I like that. What I mean to say is that process has been useful for me. Continues to be useful almost every single day. So let's see, where was I? In the same way, the beliefs responsible for emotional problems are deeply rooted, unconsidered assumptions. And these beliefs are false. Fortunately, when we wish to identify these beliefs, we start with an advantage. We already have a good idea, on the basis of the theories of Albert Ellis and the experience of thousands of therapists employing his method, of the mistaken beliefs many people hold. Such beliefs show a common pattern. They take the form of demands, musts, or shoulds. For instance, a person faced with a public speaking assignment may believe that he must not look foolish in public, and that to do so would be terrible. While it's reasonable not to want to look foolish in public, it's harmful to demand that this be guaranteed not to occur. Thus, the first step in correcting public speaking anxiety is to accept, fully and without reservation, that nothing can possibly give you an ironclad guarantee that you will not look foolish in public. You may possibly look foolish in public. To do so would be unfortunate, but not terrible. The beliefs that give people emotional problems are evaluative beliefs. Virtually all emotion comes from evaluative thinking. Thus, if you just make a simple observation, you will not feel emotion. Let's consider a statement such as, quote, "Jake admires me." That's an assertion of fact only. By itself, it does not spawn feelings, but if you add an evaluation, then you produce an emotion. For example, quote, "I like Jake admiring me. I love Jake admiring me. I dislike Jake admiring me. I loathe Jake admiring me." The strength of any like exists on a scale from 0% to 99.9%. You can never prefer something at the 100% level because no matter how strongly you desire it, theoretically you could always yearn for it even more. If you prefer to be admired by Jake only slightly, at the 10% level, say, you will feel mildly pleased that he's admiring you, and mildly displeased should he despise you. If, on the other hand, you prefer it at the 90% level, you will feel rather great when Jake admires you and greatly disappointed if he doesn't. Thus, preferences create emotions. Since the preferences are based on a scale from 0% to 99.9, appropriate or reasonable emotions come from preferences. On the other hand, inappropriate or unreasonable emotions come from demands rather than preferences. What we call demands consist of magical, absolutistic, moralistic notions, and take the form of musts and shoulds. For example, Jake absolutely must admire me, and it would be awful if he didn't. Musts and shoulds lead to dysfunctional emotions, emotions that eat away at you, such as anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, and self-pity. Demandingness also leads to self-defeating behaviors such as procrastination, violence, and addictions, including alcoholism, substance abuse, overeating, gambling, and compulsive shopping. The key to the 3-minute therapy method is that it's perfectly rational and generally helpful to have preferences, especially quite strong preferences. But it's irrational and harmful to turn these preferences into demands or musts. The majority of emotional problems arise because individuals believe that something or other must be, or not be. For example, I must do well at school, instead of I prefer to do well at school. I must not feel anxious, instead of, it's unfortunate that I sometimes feel anxious. Or, my spouse must not behave coldly toward me, instead of, I find it unpleasant when my spouse behaves coldly toward me. Allied with the judgment that something must or must not happen is the judgment that when it doesn't or does happen, this is awful, terrible, horrible, shameful, or unbearable. In many different ways, we will show how these judgments lead to personal difficulties. Thinking in terms of musts is the essence of unrealistic, irrational thinking, as well as self-defeating behavior. There are 3 kinds of musts, or irrational demands. We will meet each one of these many times in the following chapters. Must number 1, demands on oneself. Must number 2, demands on other people. Must number 3, demands on the situation or on the universe. All right, I have a meeting with some cartel members, government cartel members, coming up in a few minutes. So I do need to get wrapped up and get ready. So let me end the book there for today. And I'm trying to check my demands. I need to make sure that I go into this expecting a likely outcome and not one that I would definitely strongly prefer. Hopefully I will not be in a cage at the end of today. But I'm going to challenge some cartel members in court. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, in that vein, I'm going back to the things that we've talked about over the past few weeks. I'm going to need to be calm in today's events. I'm going to need to make sure that my emotions are domesticated. I'm going to need to make sure that other people can say and do things. They might say frustrating things that could make me angry, scary things, whatever. I have to not let them dictate my feelings, and more importantly, I have to not let them dictate my reactions and what I actually do. I have to maintain piloting over this ship. And if it's safe for me to do so, you guys might get to see the recording. We'll see how it goes. All right, guys, have a great day.